It's 9 p.m. Welcome to Kutv Primetime News on this first Tuesday of October 2023. Still ahead are more stories, and just before that, I have to remind you that we will be having that discussion on the state of the nation, where we will be looking at, do we have a constitutional moment, or this is just an illusion? The National Dialogue Committee, which has been sitting at the Bomas of Kenya since 31st August, has just completed its sittings and has retreated to draft its report. But do we really have to change the constitution, or this is just a creation of the political class? We look at that with Nerima Wako, who is the CEO, Siasa Place, and also a governance and political analyst. But first, we look at the headlines. President Ruto welcomes UN Security Council's approval of Kenyan-led mission to Haiti, overriding risk concerns from skeptics. National Dialogue Committee marks final day of public hearings with presentations from Azimio and Kenya Kwanza as team now retreats to draft report. Nyamira County Health CEC Timothy Ombati squares it out in court with Governor Nyaribo over dismissal owing to an alleged drugs theft. Okay, these stories will be coming to you for the next 60 minutes. That is, we will end at around 10 p.m. My name is Dennis Omondi. Our sign language interpreter is Sheila Kinyaga. Once again, good evening and welcome to this broadcast. Now, President William Ruto has welcomed the United Nations Security Council's approval of a foreign security mission to Haiti to deal with the Caribbean nation's gang violence that has spiraled out of control in recent years. In a video address recorded within the precincts of State House, President Ruto expressed belief that the mission will help Haiti get back to a path of development and good governance. The United Nations Security Council approved sending a multinational force to Haiti on Monday.
Diplomatic relations.
The Security Council approved sending a one-year international police force led by Kenya, which sent 1,000 security personnel in July. President William Ruto, while attending the UN General Assembly, had pleaded for a solution with appropriate provisions to facilitate support for the Haiti National Police in enhancing its capacity to effectively provide security to the people of Haiti, their infrastructure and property, and now he applauds the council for what he says it has answered the call.
I am delighted that today the Security Council has directly answered this call with UN Security Resolution 2699 of 2023, which mandates the multinational security support mission to reinforce the Haiti National Police with operational support and other joint interventions to enhance its institutional capacity with the aim of increasing its effectiveness in defeating the onslaught of criminal gangs.
The head of state emphasized the mission's significance as a foundational intervention aimed at creating the necessary conditions for Haiti to consolidate its development and governance.
This mission is a fundamental intervention to provide the necessary conditions for Haiti to consolidate its development and governance. It is therefore absolutely essential that resources as well as operational scope available to the UN team, as well as other humanitarian and development actors on the ground in Haiti, be appropriately reinforced.
In a press statement released, the president termed Kenya's move an affirmation of Pan-African commitment to the continent's unity, together with the African Union's policy of solidarity with the African diaspora.
The people of Haiti, our dear friends, today stand in need. It is our fundamental moral obligation to be their friend indeed by standing with them.
The force is expected to include personnel from Jamaica, Barbados, and several other nations. The mission was authorized under the use of force in courts provision of the UN Charter. Dorothy Musyoka, KUTV.
Azimio and Kenya Kwanza are among the teams which have presented their submissions before the National Dialogue Committee as the talks team wound up the public views collection exercise at the Bomas of Kenya. The two factions disagreed over the audit of 2022 election results and party fidelity. Matters of public finance, office of the opposition leader, and cost of living are among key concerns that cut across the submissions of the groups that presented on the final day of the sittings.
It was business as usual at the Bomas of Kenya, where the National Dialogue Committee has been receiving public proposals on the issues set for dialogue by the talks team since Friday, 22nd last month. Azimio and Kenya Kwanza are among the teams who presented their submissions on this last day of the exercise, with the two groups depicting a divided thought on the matters of electoral justice and particularly audit of the 2022 general elections.
We are a country that upholds the rule of law, and we are all aware that the judiciary had already pronounced itself on that matter. The highest level of the judiciary, that is the Supreme Court, had already pronounced itself on the matter of the 2022 presidential election.
How can it be possible for these results to obtain where a candidate wins at the majority of polling stations but does not win overall? We must audit these results.
The Kenya Kwanza team hold to their stand that the August 2022 election results saga had been concluded by the Supreme Court, a stand that Azimio dispute, asserting the magnitude of irregularities that marred the process.
So looking at them casually by your eyes, they will pass for IEBC forms. One of them is obtained from the Bomas during the election results announcement, and another one is brought later on by the whistleblower who claims to work for IEBC.
The two groups, however, agree on the entrenchment of the office of the opposition leader into the constitution, with Kenya Kwanza recommending the position to fit within the National Assembly.
We support the entrenchment of the leader of opposition. It is our considered view that Parliament should enact the legislation to establish the office of the leader of opposition. This is an important office in promoting inclusivity. We have repeatedly witnessed violence after every electoral cycle due to the perceived winner-takes-it-all scenario.
Kenya Kwanza further recommends the formulation of MCA's Oversight Fund to ensure independent and swift operations of the ward bosses. Azimio, on the other hand, are still intact on the need to lower the cost of living. It has been serious business here at Bomas of Kenya as teams flash out to roll their submission to the National Dialogue Committee. As curtains comes down, Kenyans are on wait to see whether the process will heal economic and political issues in the country. Joseph Oyomo, KUTV.
Okay, still on the talks, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission is recommending the formulation of new processes and strategies to ensure that individuals selected or appointed to public and government offices have zero corruption cases. EACC also wants governors to be held accountable for all financial corruption in counties. These proposals were forwarded by EACC top officials, including its chairman, Bishop David Oginde, and CEO Twalib Mbarak, while appearing before the National Dialogue Committee today.
The first issue that I would like to talk about, chairs and members, is the appointment of persons to state and public offices, because and impunity and poor governance. EACC proposes an enhancement of procedures and mechanism for vetting of persons for election and appointment to both state and public offices, and we believe this will entail amendment of the Leadership and Integrity Act of 2012.
Now, and moving on, the case against Nyamira Governor Amos Nyaribo, filed by former Nyamira Health County Executive Committee member Timothy Ombati, will be mentioned on the 31st of this month. Nyaribo suspended Ombati, citing actions contrary to good governance, integrity, and transparency. Ombati then filed a case against what he calls his wrongful dismissal, claiming he was unlawfully terminated due to drug theft and fund misappropriation allegations. Governor Nyaribo is accusing Ombati of mishandling drug delivery, leading to a drug shortage. The governor says that Ombati prompted him to launch the distribution of over 22 million shillings worth of drugs. Ombati's lawyer, Danstan Omari, however, argues that his dismissal was a gross violation of his rights and the principles of natural justice. And moving on, new British High Commissioner Neil Wigan has toured Bomet County on behalf of T multinational company James Finlay's. Neil has hailed the historical ties between the British government and the county brought about by tea which is exported and consumed in the UK. Bomet County Governor Professor Hilary Barchok welcomed the new envoy, marketing his county as one among counties producing the highest amount of tea in the country, courtesy of British companies. He also extended an invite to the ambassador to consider sampling Bomet's agro-tourism excursion.
As the governor said, I've only arrived in Kenya recently, so this is one of my first trips outside Nairobi since I arrived, and I very much wanted to come to Bomet County because of the close links between that county and my country, the historical links that you talked about, but also the links that exist today. And I think almost every single person in Britain has drunk tea made in Bomet, and as you know, we are a country of tea drinkers.
What we have discussed this morning is just to get to know who is this friend who is coming to Kenya, and for him also to know who is the governor of Bomet and who are the people who are living in Bomet. So basically what we were discussing today, and we have agreed maybe going forward we shall have a structured engagement to find ways of strengthening our trade.
And Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi has jetted back into the country from a one-day official visit to Bujumbura, Burundi, where he engaged in crucial talks with President Evariste Ndayishimiye. Their engagement aimed at strengthening the bilateral ties between Kenya and Burundi. Mudavadi conveyed President Ruto's message that underscored the commitment of both nations to harness available opportunities for economic advancement and leveraging technological and innovative advancements in today's global business landscape. These efforts reflect a strategic vision of economic growth and regional cooperation, positioning Kenya as a central hub for business and commerce within the East African community. Okay, time for a short break here, but remember, when we come back, we dive into our conversation of the night, where we look at whether we have a constitutional moment or it is just an illusion, a creation actually, of the political class. Joining me for that conversation will be Nerima Wako, who is the CEO, Siasa Place. But for now, we take that break.
Enough to send me pictures of the two of you together before you went on tour.
Listen, she was playing games with us.
She loves you. She nearly had your baby, Dylan, which means you weren't being careful.
But she tricked me into that.
Sure. Your problem. I'm not going to be part of this love triangle anymore. So please, leave.
Nagging that drove me away from you and made me fall for another woman who has twice your beauty and half your age. So stop blaming me.
Technology, science, innovation, ICT and research. These are the ingredients upon which the solutions to the 21st century problems are founded. In a world that is rapidly changing, it's all hands on deck to ensure a balance in all fields of life. Women, young and old, are also in the front line, breaking the glass ceiling, becoming thought leaders in the larger tech space. Not forgetting other societies marginalized. And when the tech Avengers come together, we inch closer to a much safer, efficient, and sustainable world. What we view as a norm in today's advanced world was just an idea, and for nostalgic reasons, we trace back to the iconic days to bring you the retro tech. On Tech Innovation Show, we encapsulate all the pillars of the fourth industrial revolution, decoded in a language, all for one for all. Every Monday at 8:30 as we push the mantra, keep learning something new each and every day. Only on KUTV, a new experience.
Lola is an app that gives you a chance to watch videos, listen to audios, and read articles wherever you are for free. Motivational stories, dramas, campus life, technology, lifestyle, adventure, sports, academics, jobs, entertainment, and more. Download Lola now on Play Store. All you need, you got Lola.
Kipindi hewani ni mitindo ya kipwani. Kama ilivyo kipindi hiki kinahusu nyimbo za taarab, chakacha, midwara, midundiko, bila kusahau mapishi. Ambao ndio uti wa mgongo wa pwani ya Afrika Mashariki.
Jamani swaibu zangu mliopo maskani, hatuonani wenzangu, najua mwanitamani.
Hapa KUTV, nahodha mwendesha chombo cha baharini, yani ua linalunukia na kuvutia waridi tamu.
Okay, welcome back to KUTV News at 9. Now, before 2022 general elections, we had the Building Bridges initiative. That did not go so well for the proponents. We went into an election, got a winner, and somebody did not emerge, though he wanted to be president. We had demonstrations. After demonstrations, the president and the one who is supposed to be the opposition leader came to an agreement that for demonstrations to stop, we must have talks as a country and just look at the problems ailing our political system and other aspects of our lives as a nation. We ended up with the national talks, the dialogues that have been going on at the Bomas of Kenya. And right now, the public participation that has been going on there and the collection of public views has come to an end today. Several groups presented and their views were collected. Kenyans were given a chance to also send their memoranda. I don't know if yours was there or if it counts. Do we have a constitutional moment? Is it a creation of the political class? We look at all that tonight, and to help me look at that will be CEO Siasa Place, that is Nerima Wako, who is also a governance and politics analyst. Nerima, if you can join me, I understand you are joining me virtually. First of all, good evening, and it's nice to have you finally.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Okay. Just starting us off, do you think we have a constitutional moment?
That's an interesting question because a few young people have asked me the same question. One youth organization, Youth Agenda, was invited to give recommendations to the committee and basically reached out to other youth organizations to come together and support in terms of some of the issues that we feel youth need to put on the table. And it sparked a very big debate in one of my WhatsApp groups where a lot of young people feel shortchanged. They feel that they've seen something similar when we talk about BBI, the way you mentioned it in your introduction. And they've just seen things not going in a particular direction and political class taking advantage of the situation. So I think that these processes start well. I think that a lot of the issues that are brought forth are important. I do believe that majority of them do need to be tackled, but unfortunately it all goes wrong toward the end, where political egos begin to show and they come forward, and then we lose sight, we lose the agenda, and then we decide to just throw the entire baby with the bathwater. So I don't think we're at a constitutional moment, unfortunately. I think our political class is still politicking on both sides. So I think it's going to be difficult for them to come to an agreement, to come to a compromise, because they're still viewing it as which side has more wins than the other. And the Kenyan citizen is still not the main topic of these conversations.
Okay. President Uhuru Kenyatta, that's the fourth president, former president. When the Building Bridges initiative, we were at the height of it, he kept talking about a constitutional moment, referring to it several times in his speeches. Now the president, the former president, is gone. He's out of the picture. The new president is here, but we are still talking about need for dialogue, need for talks, need to change some parts of the constitution. Do you think that maybe there is something in all this talk, there is something in the push that started with President Kenyatta, now we are seeing it under President William Ruto?
I think it's important to be able to discuss some of these things, and I'll talk about particular issues that are always highlighted. We always talk about the IBC, we always talk about how it's structured, we are always concerned about how commissioners get to their positions, and we can go as far back before 2007, 2008 post-election violence, and the Kriegler report after it, where it basically said that we tend to find these commissioners too late, and some of the solutions was to have it early, some of the solutions was to have different stakeholders involved in the process, and you have had people quoting how some of the best elections were when we had IPPG, where we had representatives from different political parties sitting within the commission. So at least it was clear, you knew where interests were, because right now what we have is a lot of distrust, where we're not sure which commissioner is actually genuine, whether they are behind a political agenda. And so that's where now, if from the very base of it, the people who are to guard the vote don't have the trust of the people, it's going to be very hard to trust the results that come out. So those are some of the issues as a country we continue to struggle with. And every election, it's like a ghost that shows up and we never deal with. We get scared about the ghost, we try and hide from the ghost, and then 4 years, 5 years later again, the ghost shows up, we get scared about the ghost, we keep repeating this cycle. And not only is it with the IBC, even when you see with our constitution now, it's been what? Just over 10 years, about 12 years now, we've celebrated our constitution, but we haven't really done a review. We're now seeing devolution. Devolution is now working in some counties where they would never receive resources, but we're also seeing the struggle of collecting revenue. Counties are struggling to come up with this money. They still depend on the federal government to be able to allocate resources to the counties. Now, this is a strain. So we're seeing that the Constitution had great ideas, but sometimes it missed the mark because it didn't predict how Kenyan leaders would be able to interact with it. And even when you talk about Senate, one of the issues with the bipartisan talks is the Senate Oversight Fund. How do you have senators basically overseeing governors and they have no budget. So they're supposed to be in charge of an entire county, but they can't even traverse the county. And they're supposed to be able to say that, you know, what the governor is doing is not correct. I don't believe that it's, you know, funds are being appropriately distributed, but they don't even have staff. These guys only have one driver. Some of them are PA. They have 3 staff members, and you're supposed to run an entire county, and they don't have funding. So you see, there are a lot of issues that the Constitution didn't quite answer, and I think a review of it, especially with the involvement of the public, is important. But a lot of times we get lost in issues that are not relevant, and something that I'm seeing that existed before the Constitution, this one, is the office of opposition. So now we are questioning, now what happens to opposition? What happens when elections are so close? Someone like Honorable Raila had such a large following, and then now, he's gone. So there are a lot of questions.
So we are going to address all of them. We're going to talk about IPPG style versus the current formula we are using. We are going to talk about the funds, NG, CDF, and all that. But just before we get into that, these conversations and the issues that you have raised, you have talked about, they need or require an honest conversation. But when you look at how we got into the national dialogue that we are having currently, is we had an opposition that was not content with the result of the election and marshaled their supporters and they went to the streets. Do you think that maybe these conversations we're having currently are not as honest as they should be, because perhaps it was a ploy to convince Honorable Raila Odinga and his colleagues in Azimio to get out of the streets and get the country moving? I mean, we saw the impact of their demonstrations even on the economy, for instance.
Yes, the demonstrations definitely had a huge impact on our economy, and people are still struggling with the high cost of living, which they say is the first on the agenda of their bipartisan talks in terms of finding solutions for that. But even when we look at the issues of IEBC and the election, we began to see it crumbling even before the announcement. You know, people coined jokes around the Cherera 4. You know, that particular moment when they addressed the press was a very scary moment for our country. There are many countries that even in that particular moment, it could spiral into conflict. So we should just be grateful that as Kenyans, we somehow just chilled out. We actually did not come out on the streets at that moment. We did not fight at that moment. There was no violence at that moment. So for that, I commend the Kenyan people that we let them have their press statement, say that they disagree with the results, refuse to be part of the process of the announcement. And you remember how Bomas was. It was tense. We actually watched that moment for hours, wondering when the announcement was going to happen, wondering whether Raila and his team Azimio was going to show up. And we actually saw Chebukati come out twice and fought from speaking at the podium. Like I'm saying, we cannot downplay what happened before our eyes, because there are countries that have gone to civil war because of very similar actions such as those, where you're unhappy about particular results and you choose violence to oppose those results. So for me, I'm proud that as much as there was a side that was unhappy about the particular process, they did not choose violence on that day. So it took months later for opposition leader to come out and say, we're not happy with the way it was done. They actually took the matter to court first. Another thing we need to recognize, another thing we need to be grateful for. There are countries on our continent that do not have judiciaries that would actually listen to petitions from people who are not actually identified as government of the day, and being able to have the entire process on live TV for the entire public to see. Another thing we should be proud of before we go into negating the demonstrations. So back to the demos, I believe that protest is a human right. Demonstrations are, if you're frustrated, especially if you've used every avenue to air your grievances. So I do see that there was a process of airing grievances before, using the courts, using even their own sort of organizing and saying this is our last resort. And now you have seen that they've come together and they've sat down, and we're hoping out of this sitting down we'll see a solution come out of it. It's unfortunate that lives have been lost. It's unfortunate that it's mainly young people who end up dead during these things, some from stray bullets, some of them just not even being involved in the protests, just by walking and passing by, they have found themselves dead. And that's the unfortunate part about all of this. But what I do support is peaceful protests.
Yeah, sure. I think that is one thing that from across the political divide, we all agree that protests must be peaceful. And of course, we have the Public Order Act that directs how we do all these things. But then this is a conversation that could potentially end up in a referendum. You heard how people presented. Some people felt that the presentations were rushed. But from where you sit, do you think that your voice was heard in the sittings? Was it conducted in the best way it could happen?
I think I definitely appreciate that there was opportunity. There's been comments that people wish that this process was longer. They wanted more voices to be heard. It did feel a little bit limited. A lot of the voices that we had are people who are around Nairobi or based in Nairobi. We didn't get to hear, especially from Mama Mboga. We heard from professionals, we heard from politicians, we heard from civil society sector. And it would be good to hear the voice of the average Kenyan and to have more grassroots engagements and actually traversing the country, because it's national. It's a national matter. So it would have been good to see the committee even travel to the 8 regions, looking at the regional blocks and inviting the public to just come and speak to them and air their views. And another thing that I feel is I saw a lot of creative ideas, like Law Society of Kenya suggesting that the presidential election should be had separately. It shouldn't be on the same day, and giving a lot of reasoning behind that. And even there was also some suggestions around if an individual, because it's done separately, if an individual doesn't make it president, they can still choose to vie for another particular seat and still be involved in the election. So I think there are different ideas that are creative. Some of them are useful. Some of them are just outlandish. But that's what you get when you open things to the public.
Okay, we are going to discuss, of course, we cannot exhaust everything that was discussed in a matter of 2 weeks in 15 minutes or so, but we are going to definitely look at that later. But the process is already having some element. Something is going around this process, and it did to BBI, and we know how it ended. 3 Kenyans have gone to court to challenge the constitutionality of the whole of this process. Do you see this process surviving that court action?
I do not see it surviving, simply because I'm assuming, I haven't seen the documents that have been submitted to the courts. I'm assuming that a lot of it is going to rely on process. And that's another protection of the Constitution. Like I mentioned, we didn't get a diverse point of views, and I'm sure that's going to be the argument, because our Constitution does push for diversity and following process and public participation. So it can be argued that only people who have access to reach this committee are the ones who are able to air their views. And also the fact that the time frame is also very short. Another thing, in terms of the amount of time you have to introduce an issue to the public and the amount of time public can participate on an issue, 2 weeks is very, very short. It is something like 60 days.
Yeah.
That's even a requirement when it comes to government process. So I can see it not surviving. But also when you talk about the public, right now, their concern is not at a referendum right now. It's the high cost of living. We know this, and that's why even with the BBI, it didn't float anywhere. As much as people agreed with a lot of the things, so they've tried to throw in even affirmative action, gender representation. As long as the Kenyan people feel the pinch in their pocket, politics is not going to be an important agenda for them right now.
Okay.
And so they're probably going to brush it aside if a referendum is to come to the table.
Okay, fine. Thank you so much. We continue this conversation on the other side of the break. Don't go too far.
I'm Associate Professor in the Institute of Philosophy of Jagiellonian University in Krakow, Poland, and I'm the main coordinator of the CAFE project, which is being here hosted by Kenyatta University.
My name is Eva Hudoba. I am a project manager in this consortium. Keep watching cutting edge research at Kenyatta University Television.
Are you an aspiring media practitioner, a graduate, or you just want to advance your skills in television production? Then welcome to Kenyatta University, where education meets innovation. KUTV, the premier university television station in Kenya, is now offering short courses in TV studio, field technical operations, and video editing. Through these courses, you will acquire hands-on skills on camera operations, media production, lighting techniques, audiovisual editing, and sound and visual control, and how to operate key equipment in modern TV control room. Enroll today at KUTV and discover your full potential in cutting-edge TV broadcasting. Graduates of these courses will receive professional certificates. For more information, visit our offices at KUTV Studios or call us on 020-870-4252 or 020-870-4255 or SMS us on 0739-110-544. KUTV, a new experience.
Adventures across the African continent.
See breathtaking wildlife, stunning landscapes,
and out of this world technologies.
Meet incredible scientists
and learn fantastic facts.
Explore, discover, be amazed.
Be part of the next generation of African change makers.
Be a part of ENGEN, Africa's #1 science discovery program. Yay!
We're learning every day.
Okay, welcome back. We are still conversing with Nerima Wako, who is the CEO Siasa Place, just looking at what the sittings at Bomas, that is the National Dialogue Committee, bipartisan talks, what they have managed to collect from Kenyans and whether this is going to help us get somewhere in terms of solving some of the problems we are having as a nation. But just continuing or going on with this, we have seen proposals from various persons. One of the issues on the table was the 2/3 gender rule. So far, the proposal that got people at least attention of many was the proposal from the former Attorney General, that is Githu Muigai, who says we need to reduce the number of constituencies to 200 and to 100, that is, and have 2 members elected, 1 woman, 1 man. What do you think of that proposal? Is this going to help us solve the 2,000 general impasse that we have been having for a very long time? Because this one now gives us a 50-50.
So you're not going to agree with what I'm going to say, but constitutional lawyer Wainaina is constantly sharing how, compared to other African countries, we actually do not have a bloated government, as much as Kenyans always complain about the public wage bill and how we have too many representatives. So according to how many we are, because remember, Kenya, we are 50 million citizens, and considering that we have representatives that are supposed to be able to work with that number, we are not that far off in terms of number. Wastage is a whole other story, corruption is a whole other story, but the number of representatives that we have is not that much compared to the number of population that we have. So now, going to your question, in terms of Gidu Mugai's submission, it's actually something that existed before. There was a campaign called the Green Amendment Act. It was being pushed by Agostino Neto in about 2015, 2016, and even the likes of Daisy Amdani, who now sits on the board that was recently appointed by the president to push for 2/3 in terms of affirmative action. And it was the same or very similar sort of solution in terms of cutting down the number of representatives and having 1 male, 1 female in terms of the constituencies. So a lot of people did agree with that because it does force for more than 2/3. It forces for 50% representation, but theirs went a little bit further. It also talked about having a youth representative and having a persons with disability representative. So talking about inclusivity as a whole. I think Kenyans would prefer that method, honestly, because right now they see that our leadership is a waste compared to how much is spent on the amount of trips that they take, or the amount of resources that are used on rallies or meetings, and so the numbers are not making sense to them. But if we have the same type of leader in this elected position, it's going to be tough, because when you're saying having less representatives, it means you have to have people who work and work hard and work well. What I'm saying is we need people who are efficient. And at the moment, a lot of our politicians are not efficient at all. In fact, they're the opposite of efficiency. And that's why we have repeated roles in a lot of departments, in public service. We have a lot of ghost workers. We have a lot of people who are in positions of power and we're not quite sure how they are in those particular positions. A lot of them is because of who they know. So unless we change the culture of our political leaders, that method is not going to work. It won't. It will collapse because we will have one representative who cannot manage the area that they're in charge of.
Yeah. But when you say that we are not overrepresented, someone would argue, for example, like I was seeing a comparison, somebody comparing Kenya and the US in terms of the size. They have 52 states, 52 governors, but you can see this, it is almost like a continent on its own. And then when you look at the number or the roles that we are having, some people in government even have roles that are colliding. You don't have, it is like we have a duplication of roles in some offices. Look, for instance, when we had the CAS, we are having a PS in a ministry. We are having a CS in a ministry. Do we need all these people looking after the same docket, literally?
We don't need, so first of all, the CAS position, when President Uhuru Kenyatta first came into power, and he's the one who he opened that particular position unconstitutionally. when you look at an individual like David Osiani, he was a previous CAS member, and his particular role was in trade and industry, and he had 7 roles that he was in charge of during President Uhuru Kenyatta's term. Now, when you look at the CAS position, the same position that David Osiani was holding was now being held by 3 CAS officers under President Ruto's administration. So what he did was just break the roles and responsibilities and give them to particular individuals. And like I said previously, it's about political alignment. It's about friends. It's about giving people positions because you have to give back because someone voted for you. That's the unfortunate case of Kenya. So what Kenya needs is efficient individuals. And you mentioned the United States. Remember, the United States has a population of 300 million people and counting. And like you said very well, it's a continent of its own. North America is a continent of its own. But even when you look at how state governments work, they are their own countries. Each state has its own legislations, its own laws, its own policies, its own flags, its own number plates. It runs like an independent country. And these independent countries also have assemblies, also have councilmen. So they also have very good representation to the grassroots. And government is still one of the largest institutions of employment in the United States of America. So yeah, comparing Kenya to America is like comparing one state with Kenya. We are one state compared to the larger state that is the United States of America. So I don't think we can compare those two. They're completely different.
Okay, I'm being told we are running out of time, but just before we go, there is this whole issue of funds. We are seeing, for example, right now, there is clamor to have a Senate Oversight Fund. We have the entrenchment of the National Government Constituency Development Fund in the Constitution. MCS are saying, give us a fund. Some people are also arguing, instead of creating more counties, add more money to the CDF allocation. When you look at all this, MPs, what most of them do with the CDF money is contribution to education, for instance, buying school buses, constructing classrooms and all that. Do we have enough money, for example, to create another fund like the Ward Development Fund, the Senate Oversight Fund? Do we really have money? We are putting in place austerity measures. Just yesterday, the president, not the president actually, the chief of staff at State House, that is Felix Koskei, announced that we will not be having non-essential travels for top government officials. At this point, should we be discussing these funds? Is it tenable?
It's not tenable. Like we discussed earlier, the issue that we have with our county governments is revenue collection. We should be having discussions on how can we collect more resources, or how can we better manage our public resources. We have a lot of money being wasted and not enough being collected. And that's where the challenge is with our leadership, and that's what they need to fix. So like you mentioned, CDF is things that are visible. People utilize it because they're thinking of the next campaign, they're thinking of the next election. And unfortunately, the typical Kenyan voter has to see. They have to see what you've done. So it's easier to contribute to school fees, to school buses and schools, rather than to policies that support the Kenyan citizen, because they won't be able to know that you are behind this policy. So again, unless we educate the public to understand the important roles of the different representatives, then they will know that it's not your MCA's job to care about certain issues. And it's another person's docket. There are people called CECs. There are people who are ward administrators that also have very important jobs. But a lot of people in rural areas have no clue that they even exist. So I would say we shouldn't be concerned about who holds these resources. But I do think that areas like Senate, is important. Like I explained to you, they're supposed to do oversight, but they can't even do their job because they don't even have the resources to follow up or the people to hire to be able to follow up with a governor. But to have resources to pay for school fees, we have members of parliament who are very upset when that was taken away from them because they are not quite sure how they are going to be able to perform and to be voted again if they are not paying children's school fees. And we have a major challenge with our education system that needs improvement. So we do not have the resources for it.
Nerima Wako, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I look forward to hosting you some other time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night. Now, moving on, senators have today debated the bill operationalizing County Additional Allocation Fund, which will see counties get additional money for development. According to the senators, the additional allocations should follow county population parameter. The bill seeks to ensure that there will be equitable sharing of funds, with governors being called on to ensure the money is properly accounted for.
In today's Senate sitting, senators have supported the additional allocation bill tabled in the Senate by Majority Leader Aaron Jeruyot. The bill seeks to ensure that counties get additional funds for development. According to Tana River Senator Dunstan Mungatana, the money should be allocated to counties in accordance with the needs.
It seems that some counties, their needs were not factored. You know, maybe we need more medical personnel, but we are being forced to lease equipment and from a certain company. And this was something that we inherited from the previous administration. My own comment is to ask that before we just push money to support a contract that is so unpopular and a contract that for some counties it was coerced upon them, to relook at this whole mechanism.
Counties will be given 5.86 billion as part of the County Government Additional Allocation Bill 2023 for the Leased Medical Equipments Program, contrast with 5.68 billion allocated for the current fiscal year. And according to senators who weighed in on the allocation, demanded accountability to prevent forced delivery of medical equipments.
Prioritize the conclusion of this bill as a matter of urgency. It has already gone through the National Assembly and it has undergone some amendment under the committee as recommended, because some funds that were left out have been included, which means the bill will have to go for negotiation between the National Assembly and the Senate, delaying the process even further.
Counties will receive additional 4.7 billion for the establishment of industrial parks in the draft rule that Treasury CS Jugula Dongo submitted to the Senate. Each county will also get 100 million for the integrated program, with 5 counties receiving 454 million as supplement for construction of their headquarters. According to Nandi Senator Samson Cherargei, the Senate should be given the mandate to give their verdict on the budget-making process, not only on revenue allocation debate.
Dwale, who is the current CS of defense, he was the majority leader. He tried to intimidate some of us. We told him the price of intimidation, fear, and blackmail, the price has fallen down. So I want to challenge, let us not fall. If they are ready, Mr. Speaker, we have even taken these matters to court, and courts have pronounced the Senate as a role in budget-making process. It is not only on conditional grants and division of revenue, even the budget-making process, Mr. Speaker. So I want to challenge our committee, be on the lead when you go to mediation. Don't give even an inch. Protect the Senate at all costs.
The funds that have been allocated, however, will require proper accountability to ensure there is efficient service delivery. Edward Nyamo, KUTV.
Between January and June, fuel consumption hit a 5-year low, a situation that is attributed to the rising fuel prices. This finding, however, do not include the pandemic-affected year 2020, when COVID-19 restrictions greatly reduced demand in transportation and manufacturing. Yvonne Kemuma tells us more on this Tuesday's Business Wrap.
Fuel consumption between the months of January and June reached its lowest point in over 5 years, with the exception of 2020, when restrictions imposed to curb the spread of coronavirus significantly reduced the demand from the transport and manufacturing sector. This decline can be attributed to the combination of high fuel prices, which discouraged people from driving, particularly the middle class, who opted to keep their cars parked at home. According to data, the consumption of super petrol decreased by 5%, dropping to 1.01 billion litres from 1.074 billion litres the previous year. Similarly, diesel consumption saw a 4% decrease, falling to 1.031 billion litres from 1.36 billion litres during the same period. Elsewhere, the European Commission has granted its approval for Kenya's economic partnership agreement with the European Union, bringing the Kenyan country one step closer to a deal which will grant its good, duty-free access to the extensive European market. The European Commission, acting as the EU's negotiator for trade agreements, announced its endorsement of the EU-Kenya EPA and forwarded it to the European Council. There are only two remaining steps for the deal to come into effect: approval from the European Council and the European Parliament. Yvonne Kimuma, KU TV.
Okay, and now in sports, the national hit squad is gearing its preparation ahead of the Mandela Cup Championship slated for this month at the Durban International Convention Center in South Africa. The event, which will have 13 categories in the men's division and 12 in the women's division, will be held in honor of former South Africa President Nelson Mandela to mark the 10th anniversary of the death of SA's first president. The team is in high spirit despite funding uncertainty, with barely a week to the start of the event. And electric goals from Mikhailo Mudryk and Armando Broja and Mauricio Pochettino's side, vital 3 points after a difficult start to the Premier League campaign, with a comfortable 2-0 win at Craven Cottage against Fulham. That marks the end of KUTV News at 9. Thank you so much for choosing to get informed by our team of journalists and reporters, as well as other technical crew members. Thank you so much for watching us once again. I don't have anything extra. Myself and Sheila Kenyaga, who has been on our sign language interpretation, say good night. By the way, I'm Dennis Omondi. Good night.